My first interview with Ralph Mollet went so well. The numbers were so high. The feedback was so good that it only made too much sense to do another one. This is the sequel, and I'm joined by an esteemed sports media executive. He has done so much in the business. I think, Ralph, you've got as many Emmys as you have guitars. I could be wrong.
At least that many. At least that many.
Yeah.
No,
I was waiting for you, Ralph. I was waiting for you to start during the interview just to stack up the Emmys behind you.
No. I won't do that unless it's the office. I mean, a lot of people have an office with that immediately bookshelf behind them, so it kind of comes with the terrain. But yeah, I'd have to go into the living room and set up the computer and light it a little bit because it's dark in there by the fire. I could even fire up the fireplace. That would give you a really homespun ambience if you want. Maybe part 3 we can move in that direction.
How about this?
But I appreciate you having me back.
Yes. It's going to be fun. We're going to have a lot of discussion about your career and your life. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio and do live events. So you talk about a fireplace. How about a fireplace with you drumming the guitar here? I want to know, what is the last song you played on one of those guitars?
Oh, the last song. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. The last one I played of recent vintage, I'm trying to think back because I was saying that I go online. There's a service called Jam Kazam, and I hook up with musicians all over the world. We have sessions. We do jam sessions. Vocalists come in, all kinds of instrumentalists come in. But I'm trying to think of the last song I actually played. Might have been, okay. It was a Roy Orbison song, Blue Bayou. That's the only one I can remember. There's probably tons of other, but I'll throw that out there as the last song I performed online with other musicians.
It's almost symbolic that that's the title of the song, Blue Bayou, because when you hold all these Emmys, it's like you blew by the competition. So for you,
right.
It makes so much sense. And you took an interesting route in your career where, a lot of times you can latch on with a corporation, a network, but you are such a self-made man, and there's such a set of challenges that come with that. So how does that separate you from somebody who goes in the system and rises the ranks of one of these networks?
Well, that's a great question. A lot of people in TV sports come up through a network path, whether it's a commercial network or a cable network, and they start off as a PA or a production secretary, and then they move up to AD, associate producer, and then hopefully get a shot on the front bench producing or directing. And that's just the normal progression historically in our business of how things pretty much work. But it's funny. I did certainly that kind of a path, but with independent companies. When I started out in sports, I worked for a production company that was fully independent. That Marvin Sugarman Productions did CBS Sports Spectacular events. We did the New York Racing Association events, the off-track betting events, and it was an office and it was people. And, there was that progression that I discussed that would occur at a network. But I kind of learned the business from an independent production company framework. What you have to do, how you do it, the budgets you're working with, the people you hire, mainly freelance. It's more of a 1099 approach to business than a W-2. So, and it just is the way I came up. Like my first job in TV sports was with Marvin. And I learned how to, first of all, production manage, which is the guy who kind of stays in the office, but sometimes comes out. They call them operation producers now. Can you imagine? From the word production manager, we've graduated to an esteemed position of operations producer. Essentially, it's the same thing. It's just a less glorified title. And, you book everything. You book the crew, you book the truck, you book the transmission path. You even book lunch sometimes and hotel rooms with an agency. So coming up that way is how I got the opportunity to run my own business. having an office in New York for about 7 years, and then setting up my own production facility for of which I ran for 15 straight years in a facility here in New Jersey, where we did online editing, took incoming and outgoing feeds all over the world. I had about 3 or 4 Avid rooms, a voiceover room with a telestrator where guys like you would sit and draw over the screen as needed. And I had a few legends in my studio in the day: Dick Vitale, of course, Terry Gannon, and there are several others, I'm sure. And you invest in equipment, you invest in some cameras, some editing gear, but all of those investments, I have to say, were premised on contracts. I didn't buy it and build it and then hope they would come. You know,
Yeah.
I didn't see that as a
Yeah.
financial model unless you're
Sure.
hooked up as a subsidiary of somebody big and they're paying bills and financing and rolling the dice. So as contracts came in, like for example, the first 7 years I edited in New York at an edit facility. And those were pretty heavy bills. I mean, you go into an edit room and you have an editor and the meter starts ticking. And if the client is quick, it goes well. If the client wants to decide and trim these edits, so can you go back 5 frames? Can you dissolve a little slower? You're going to be there for weeks and you're going to pay for it. If they want to move fast and turn it around and get it done, still quality, but uh, more time efficient, then you'll save some money. But all that adds up to money out of pocket, which affects your bottom line. Once you have some gear within reason of the contracts that you have, editing cameras, some and whatever some of the new technology items are, encoders, et cetera, um, you can bring that outgoing money back in house and play with the numbers a little bit and actually make some money, which was the attractive part of running my own business, being able to bring that outside spending back inside the Windfall production facility, and it worked. It works quite well. I mean, I don't have that facility that I did for the 15-year stretch because business changed, things come and things go. But in the day, it was a very profitable machine, and I really enjoyed working it and heading it up.
In growing the machine, we go back to some of the beginnings of your career, and what was most humbling, some of the most humbling tasks that you did early on, breaking in the business, that you look back and you're like, wow, I did that.
Yeah. We all had our moments of complying with our bosses and senior producers' desires. Trying to think of the most humbling. I kind of found every one of those experiences challenging. Um, oh, here's an interesting one. Doing the Hambletonian, this was humbling, but I enjoyed it. During doing the Hambletonian way back, appeared on the CBS Sports Spectacular Live. I was a stage manager, and Brent Musburger was the host. So that was like, wow, that was pretty big, and I was just getting started really in those days. So he turns to me. I'm, stage manager, obviously standing near the talent before they're on camera shot, and they're hosting and play-by-play calling, etc. So he says, "Hey kid, can you get me an orange soda?" And like an obedient stage manager, I went and got him an orange soda, and he was happy for the remainder of the afternoon as we went live, etc. Hambletonian is a harness race, standardbred race, and that would be one of them. On the horse racing I did in New York area and the New York racing, etc. I work with an analyst, Frank Wright, um, and he once said to me, it was a little humbling. He said, "You know something, kid? You do make mistakes, and we understand that, but you only make them once."
Ooh.
And I guess, was that a compliment, or was that I'm running out of all the one-time mistakes I could possibly make? But anyway, that was an interesting exchange that we had. and I'd have to try to really jog my memory to think back at some others. Um, I think the humbling thing in the beginning when you're working in an office as a production manager and you're hiring crew, producers and directors are very picky about their peeps most of the time. And you have to deliver within that spectrum of who they want. And if you're not, if you don't, or you can't, maybe because they're booked or because they're doing a package for somebody else, you take it from the producers and the directors about, well, how come? Where's our guy? Where's camera three? I mean, he's our guy. Um, so that might have humbled me as they came up to my desk and, how you say, browbeat me a little bit for so I could submit to their will. But what I could have said, and what I would have said many years later, I said, well, you have a professional, you have a New York-based professional that I'm hiring. I'm not putting kids out there from school. These are professionals that work in the New York marketplace, which is pretty established. If they haven't done your show, why don't you sit down and give them some idea of what they're going to do, and give them some instruction and some direction before you jump all over them, not reading your mind. And I find, and so that taught me to go to a show as a producer, director, executive producer, and not take things for granted. Like camera one, camera two, they know the show. They've done a million of these events. They're good. Well, okay, that's true, but it doesn't hurt to tell them what you want, and specifically at what time to deliver a shot, or to deliver a sequence on replay, simply because it works, you want it, and it's called communication. So I take that over prepared communicating to your crew pretty seriously, based on some of my early days of experience with other folks.
How much on top of the good communication, having that, and like in a team setting, athletic setting, the chemistry makes a big difference in the wins and losses. Like if you have
Sure.
a nice synergy. So what would you do, and what do you do to create that synergy within everybody who's a part of the broadcast? Because that if they're having an enjoyable experience, that the broadcast is going to turn out that much better.
Right. You have to set a tone. As a producer or director or producer director, which I work in a hybrid category most of the time, you have to set a tone. First of all, being prepared. Secondly, having respect for all of the counterparts in the crew and also in the booth. Respecting the what the commentators are going to say. I mean, it's not like network news where you get in their ear and they repeat everything you say, which they will do if you choose to. But I think you have to trust your commentary team to, first of all, have done their homework, or at least working with the stats guy in the booth, or the researcher and stats guy, working with them on an exchange of information live as it happens, that's meaningful. Sure. And that supplements the broadcast, as opposed to second guessing everything they say, or really, putting a saddle on them and riding them really tough until it's over. I tend to give people space respectfully in a broadcast, crew and booth. I mean, heck, you're going to talk for 2 hours. You can't tell me that you didn't get a chance to tell this story, tell that story. I said, your mic was open for a long, long time. I'll remind you a few things if we're changing pictures or moving from one item to the other. Sure. But all of that homework and all of that research, you have to filter it and cultivate it. And I have to trust your ability to thread the story from segment to segment to drive home the essence of what our telecast is. Now, that's the way I do it. I mean, others may say, talent, they're talking dogs. You got to tell them what you want. You got to stay on their case the whole time. I don't believe that. I trust them, and the people I've worked with successfully, I've done that with. Now, in the analyst category, you get on some of the offbeat sports I've done, you get the first time analyst who knows an offbeat sport like cold, but has never appeared on camera. You got a little work to do there because there's, as you know, there's things like addressing the camera properly, uh, looking back and forth from your co-host to your analyst to create an aura that you're really trying to communicate with them. And also, showing some emotion, facial expression, and digging into that well of knowledge. We don't doubt the knowledge you have. It's trying to get it off on TV, having never done it. Those are the challenging roles. And you see Olympians who are former champions who become commentators. And, some of the good producers, or at least the specializing producers, know how to cultivate and get a performance out of them, which is not easy. So I think that's a challenge for a producer to get a performance out of a new commentator, former Olympic champion or stick and ball World Series, NBA champion or whatever, and getting them on board. There are actually some services too in our business that, like little universities, where you buy a big time talent and then you send them off to University of Broadcasting, and hopefully they come back at least ready for a camera to talk to. And that's another way to do it. But a lot of the folks that I encounter, they're coming cold, and other than a conversation with the SVP or the CP, the rest is on me to get them to to perform. And it is a performance. It is sport. It is detail. It is stats, but it is a performance. And the good ones are performers, and they engage the audience. They romance the lens, in my opinion.
I like how you describe that, romance the lens. And in you creating this juggernaut career-wise, how were you able to romance your kids into joining the business as well?
Oh, well, the thing is with any business, if I had a dry cleaners on the corner, and I wanted to get some inexpensive labor, get the family involved. Why not? Hey, you're feeding everybody anyway. But in TV, there was a show business lure, let's call it, or an attraction for my sons, Brett and Todd, to consider it. Plus, as they were growing up, God, my son Brett was at 6 was on an early PC doing 2D animation, and running roughshod over anything that I could ever do with a computer, doing animated satellites around the USA globe, doing crazy stuff like that. And he had a propensity for computer programming and computer graphics and editing. So he's now a professional video editor based out of the New York marketplace. He's done quite a bit of sports editing for Big East and for the New York City marathons. And one of the pleasures of working with Brett actually is actually getting to work with him as a colleague. He and I co-produced a couple of projects which were not sports related. They were call them corporate video or marketing videos. We did a story of a 3-time cancer survivor who set up his own agency and is helping other cancer patients, cope with and deal with the problems, and also get into the molecular testing, which is kind of brand new in the cancer world, where they take a DNA sample and they actually match up the treatment directly to target the problem. The other event, we did something called the Great Healthy Yard Project, was for a marketing company that was trying to take the lawn and garden pollutants, which are generally non-organic pesticides, out of the world so that the water supply wouldn't get the runoff, and our water supply wouldn't be contaminated by pesticides and such. So those are 2 interesting projects. He did a hell of a job directing and shooting it and editing it. I was kind of like a co-producer. I set the subjects down and asked them questions because I had done that before, and he hadn't, and I sort of got him involved in the process that way. Really quality performance by Brett. And it's funny, his brother Todd started out of Northeastern with an internship at the Conan O'Brien show when it was still in New York City. So that was, he said he applied for an internship. I don't even know if he was really a TV destined guy, but he got the one in New York with Conan and then went out to LA. They moved the whole staff out there and he worked with them in LA for a while. Had some fun, found out that LA is the place he wants to live, where he is now, and he's working for Paramount Plus as a software engineer. Wow. A far cry from production, but a really, really good area of the business to be in. So I'm happy to say if I had some influence on them, it was productive because they're both doing well. And I didn't have to twist arms, and I didn't drag them off to the truck. I did offer that PA money, that runner money, whenever I could, and they both did some of that for me. Running and PAing and cable pulling, etc., simply for the money. But these two areas they wound up in are quite good, and they're very happy.
You've got to be a very proud father, Ralph.
I am.
Yes.
But they won't take over Windfall. They don't want to have anything to do with Windfall or sports. They have found, however, their niches, through discovery and through process. And I'm pleased with that. And actually, Todd was doing, when he was with Conan in New York, he was doing some of those open mic stand-ups in some of the New York comedy clubs, which you don't get paid for, but he was doing some of them. And I went to a few, and I was really blown away by what he could do and how he could tell stories about me that were downright hilarious. I mean, like seeing your son up there on stage doing a stand-up and have him, talking about you and making fun of you has got to be, talk about humbling, one of the most humbling experience I had. But nonetheless, I laughed quite heartily, and it was fun.
Could you give us an example?
Simple example of him embarrassing his dad in a club.
Yeah.
I'll give you one that I remember. He was talking about parents basically, and he's saying, when I'm with my dad and we park the car in a shopping center, for example, most people park the car, beep it, and go and do whatever they got to do, shopping, movie, whatever it is. He said, what my dad does is he parks the car, takes his phone out, takes security pictures of where he parked the car and the fact that it's undented. So that if something happens to it, he'll have, legal and visible proof of it. And I split a gut laughing when he said that, because I have done that in the past with him. And that's one standout thing. There are probably some others that are even funnier, but that would be one that, it makes you a little self-aware of how hokey you can be as an adult, as a parent. So
your creativity, your hokiness is actually probably one of the good things that's led to what you've done. And I'm not from
the Midwest. How could I be hokey?
Yeah, I know exactly. But having a little bit of that, I think actually is a good thing. And I know Zoom has this limit on time before it cuts out, right. But I'm in awe of what you've done and what you are doing. And I want to leave you with this last question. Ralph Mole is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. You, as an interviewer yourself, as you were talking about when you're sitting down with subjects, what is your style?
When I'm sitting down, I prepare questions. I mean, simply because I don't do it like as often as an on-camera and a play-by-play talent like yourself. And of course, this awesome series that you set up, interviewing all of us behind the scenes of TV. I don't have those chops, so I just do a lot of question preparing. And you know what I find, and I see you do this, and I'm sure all good talent do this, is every answer takes you to an unprepared question that is actually even better than what you've prepared.
Yes.
So, I mean, that you have to be sensitive to. When you're listening, you have to listen. You ask a question and you listen. You take in the answer. And if it's, sort of just a stat or just a detail, you move on. if it's a golden nugget, you pursue it further.
Yes.
And I think that's the magic of an interview. I think with anybody, whether it's news, sports, entertainment, you know, that kind of thing. It all applies.
Ralph Millay might prepare his questions, but he is unquestionably one of the great guys in this business. And if you ever have a question for him, that man always has an answer. Ralph Millay,
Okay.
I'm Bryan Fenley. This has been the Honest Something podcast. Ralph, thanks so much for doing this. Really enjoyed the conversation.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me back. And if there's a part three, I'm willing and able.